him why he was here. And the white nationalist said, you know, yeah, look, I know we here, we're not one. But in fact, the city of Portland is one of the only places with a shrinking black population by both percentage and whole number. So you can say you don't want us here, but you're doing something we can never get away with. You're disappearing the black population of Portland, Oregon. That was his response. And each day, we prove that right? Not just on the streets when we use bad tactics, right? Not just in narrative when we paint pictures of a world that actually no one wants to live in. I don't want to live in a world movement to get away with what it gets away with every day is the lasting legacy of white supremacy, right? That's what we see every day when people try to repress, right? Black Lives Matters activists, right? And others on the streets, law enforcement, paramilitaries. But we also have to understand, right? It's also our attitudes, right? If we are going to be an alternative to the white nationalist vision of America, it's not the status quo, but it's not a future, right? Where we make people feel like they don't have a place. And that's a big challenge for us, right? And that's why we have to get serious. Look, I'm here to tell folks, as someone who spent time with white nationalists, right? As a person who was organized against the white nationalist movement, we need to understand, right? We're in a very drink more Portland beer, too.
1 second.
Yes.
I'm not going to preach.
No,
I said I wouldn't
please.
preach tonight. Because I'm really trying to get on that Joe Rogan.
Just another parasite that he's gonna spit out or shit out, whatever ivermectin does. No, I think that's really. This is such an aside, but for me, like even like the census data that just came out, that was like that's all it is. But that's not the way race and racism work. It's a one-drop rule, only in favor of religion. Appear to be smaller and appear like the only thing that counts is a pure, so-called pure race.
Well, that's why, I mean, I try to, you know, like change the narrative. So I'd say to you all the time that you're white. That's what I do. I go, don't worry, babe. You're white.
Thanks, sweetie.
She loves
Chinese Italian.
Yeah,
Chinese
exactly.
Italian.
Chinese.
That's
Thank
right.
you for remembering, sir.
Someone knows your exact ethnicity. Drinking a beer. Chinese Italian.
I feel like that was a hate crime.
I memorize everyone's race. Hell yes.
I know your exact breakdown. What's math?
What am I?
Okay, yeah, I don't know as far as it goes.
Jewish. Speaking of Jews, I have a question for you, Eric, about this. You wrote this fantastic piece a few years back called "Skin in the Game," which was the first time. If you haven't read it, it's fantastic. It was the first time that I'd seen kind of like the breakdown of how the demon that just lives in it, and how it just kind of permeates throughout all of the rest of the racism, right? It's like just kind of it's just at its theoretical center is hating this nebulous term of the Jew, and I'd never seen that before. Just kind of like how it was broken down. Can you like go into more about where anti-Semitism actually fits into fights against anti-blackness and racism?
I mean, anti-Semitism has been around the United States, but this particular form of anti-Semitism starts in the 1960s, right?
Yeah.
And it's because white supremacy gets its ass kicked, right, by my grandparents and others out here who struggle. And so imagine though, you believe black people are inferior. You're never going to accept that you lost to black people, right? And so particularly your most significant political defeat. So you have to come up with another theory. And they borrow from Europe, and they borrow from the anti-Semitic writings of Henry Ford, and they re-scripted a narrative, right, that allowed them to hold that white superiority in place. And what they said is, we didn't lose to black people, right, because that's impossible in their eyes. They lost to Jews. And so Jews became like the nefarious center for like every wrong, right? A one-stop shop, right? Jews as communists, Jews as capitalists, right? Jews as this and that. But it's a constructed narrative that like simplifies, right? It others, it creates this side or that side, right? It doesn't speak to any answers. I mean, the truth is, right? The civil rights movement has delivered, and I was about to drop an F-bomb, I'm not. We'll get there, it's early. But the civil rights movement, right, has delivered more for white people in America than the white nationalist movement or white supremacy ever has, right? Except the illusion, right, of being something better. And so the truth is, right, the white nationalist movement has to blame someone. And it's never going to be marginalized communities, thus anti-Semitism. And it's why we have to take anti-Semitism seriously. It doesn't just kill Jews, it kills us too.
It's like incredibly anti-black also to be like, no, the civil rights movement didn't do it. It had to be somebody else.
That's right.
Like this wasn't African Americans on their own, like taking time off of work, struggling, you know, putting their bodies on the line, dying. It was somebody else. What do you mean? I think maybe some people will take that for granted. What you mean that the civil rights movement did more for white people? You know, obviously
affirmative action.
Okay, yeah.
Right? Welfare programs, right? The Great Society, right? So folks forget there. You know, there was this back in. Now I'm old, right? I'm gonna date myself. Like I'm gonna start talking about Nirvana concerts. But back in the 90s, there was affirmative action. A bill to kill affirmative action. It was a ballot initiative, and white folks came out in mass and overturned affirmative action in Washington State. But here's the secret, right? White people benefited from affirmative action more than any other grouping in Washington State. Why? They're the majority of veterans. They're the majority of people over the age of 55, right? Majority of people with disabilities, right? And those are the folks who were discriminated against in employment, right? So the civil rights movement has delivered lots of things for white folks, but that's not a convenient organizing, right? When you are trying to like hold on to inequality. You have to tell white people they're losing. They're not losing, they're getting the best of the world. They're getting to be human. That's what it means, right? To live in an inclusive democracy.
Yeah.
Or you can just blame the Jews, you know, whatever you want to do.
Simpler.
Yeah, it's simple. I did it! That's what I say to everyone.
Mac, I wanted to ask you about some of the defund the police language that is like, you know, in a year's time has become the arch nemesis of a lot of Democrats even, right? You know, you got Senator Cory Booker up there being like, nobody wants to defund the police, and he's being so, you know, just like ridiculous about it, and he's trying to pander to the right. But I think a lot of Democrats have, you know, looked at that slogan and demonized it as the reason why somehow, I don't know, Biden didn't win by more, which...
It's the majority that takes the majority of the benefits from civil rights and social activist movements, right? And so with the Democrats, you know, like we talked about the Republicans, they're like nuts, right? So it's cool. But the Democrats are like their own issue, because what the Democrats do is they feed and latch. So on the streets, we were all yelling, abolish the police, like burn the precinct down, like fuck the cops, like we're all the way there. And the Democrats are like, yeah, we support them. But Cory Booker's like, I want to be Obama really bad, so I'm going to say, don't say that, because Obama said that, you know? So it's like, okay, I got you. You take your marching orders, you do what you got to do. You know, the Democrats are going to do that. We have to understand that. And that's why a lot of people are like, just fuck the whole thing. Well, if you're starving and I'm starving, and you're like, I need food, and you're like, I'm like, you know what? Let's get you some food. And I beg like somebody for food because you're starving, and I eat like all of it and give you like a couple bites. Like, you're small, it's fine. So like, you know, like at that point, am I really even doing a good job, or am I just a leech? You know, I'm just a nonprofit at this point, you know? So it's like the Democrats, you know, your work being done, but it's not the people who you see on TV.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's also no one in mainstream media making the case that defund the police is arguably an incredibly tame ask, right? Right, we could say abolish, but we've decided to say defund and refund so many other things. Reaching out to people of color, how do you square that? Does it go back to anti-Semitism? And I'm not necessarily pointing at Matt for any reason.
So go back to hating this motherfucker.
Yeah, it's a layered conversation, but here's the thing to understand, right? Hate groups don't come into our towns bringing anti-Semitism or racism, Islamophobia, or even misogyny in Texas, right?
Thank you.
Texas.
They come into communities exploiting the bigotry and the divisions. Largely, right? People are coming from out of the community, right? But there is a core here, right? Who are taking advantage of the bigotry that already exists. There's another reason though, right? We should understand that authoritarianism, right, is the kind of momentum of the day, right? It is the way that the wind is blowing for a lot of people, and it's because, not because people are ideological, but because there's so much change happening in society that you can't but help to feel anxiety, right? But if you don't have a place to anchor yourself, you're gonna go to the logical construct. So what was white 50 years ago isn't what's white today, and it's not what's gonna be white 10 years ago, right? Because it is an ideology, it's a way of seeing the world. And that's why you see people of color in it. But the piece we won't get into, but I hope someone invites me to speak to it, is someday we gotta talk about the failure of the racial justice movement and the left around us. Because we have also made mistakes that have opened up big spaces around us, right? And until we come to terms with those things, right? And people are gonna get mad at me, right? But we just have to be much more strategic about the world we see every day, right? And there's no alternative to it. And that's why those folks of color are joining that angle.
Yeah. My mentor, Max Elbaum, often speaks to the 84 Rainbow Coalition from Jesse Jackson and how that was this, multiracial, anti-racist political movement that we're kind of, we struggle to get back to something like that could actually win, of course. But I wanted final thoughts on this from both of you about this administration, the Biden administration, especially considering what happened on January 6th. I'm sure, Eric, you got $1 for every insurrectionist that showed up to be like, I was right. Like,
You looked at it?
that must have been an interesting day for you. But how do you see this administration taking that up? Are they taking white nationalism seriously? And should they be treating this like the terrorist threat that they treat Muslims, with? Which, in my opinion, I'm like, well, the war on terror was fucking ridiculous. COINTELPRO is bad. Like, the FBI going after these people isn't always good. But again, that's not necessarily what the FBI was intended to do. I don't know, thoughts from both.
I mean, what are they gonna do? It's a them. Mm-hmm. It's like, if you were out there, that like the feds are the ones who were out there doing the most violence. They were the ones who pushed this the hardest. And yes, Biden's in power now, but did he fire everybody? No. They're still there. It's still the same military, still the same DHS, still the same people. Those same people in the DHS that worked there then, who we tracked last year, are still working there now. They were still tracking them. So we know who these people are. They're still here. It's the same people that greenlit the same stuff. They're still in the city, they're still in the feds, they're still in the state. So there's not going to be a response from Biden, because Biden's response is, oh, that wasn't me, that was Trump. Yeah. So this is a new America now. We're going, I don't even know if this slogan is so unpopular, but what is this? Corn pop? I don't know what the slogan is.
It should be corn pop.
It's like, what's he gonna do? He has to say, well, if all things are equal, and that's like the greatest thing, like America, that's like America's greatest sinkhole. If all things are equal, but they're not. Right? So we say, oh yeah, we have to look at the left too. No, we don't. All things aren't equal. So we really don't have to. We have to blame some black people too. There are a lot of them in poverty. It's not our fault. But I'm like, fuck all that. Well, like for real. Like, to me, that's like a bunch of oh, we have to appease the white guy. No, we don't.
Yeah.
Ted Wheeler, Joe Biden,
Nope.
that dude in California, the senator, not the mayor or the governor. I don't really like him either, but don't recall him.
Devin Nunes?
All of them. The really old one. The really old is Schumer.
Dianne Feinstein?
Dianne, the same person. Feinstein, Schumer, same person. Yeah, exactly.
They are the same person.
It's the same person.
It's like that photo where you're like, is it an old woman or a young man? A young woman like that's Dianne Feinstein and
Is the
Schumer.
dress yellow or is it blue?
Yeah.
It's Dianne Feinstein.
I feel like a Ted Wheeler is like a Chuck Schumer like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, I bet you they did the exact same shit. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way they didn't. Like, and that's the kind of people that always end up in charge, because they always get along with everybody enough, and they push just enough white supremacy to keep us in the same situation we're always in.
Yeah. Not to mention the number of former police officers and former military and current active military who were.
Right? we can spend our time trying to project what we want to think. But I think the real issue is why does town only fucking have 3 people who ran for mayor? And what's wrong in this society, right? And you have
You're next. I will.
who ran for mayor. And I want to be clear about something, right? It doesn't mean, right, that the status quo works. Everyone is telling you almost across the political spectrum that the status quo isn't working for them. And it doesn't matter whether it's perception or real, because I don't care if I perceive I'm about to stumble off the stage or I'm really stumbling off the stage, I'm gonna respond in the same exact way, right? And so we have to understand everyone feels like they're falling right now. And when people fall or they feel like they're drowning, they take really extreme measures. And so look, people say like, do you Eric, I see you hashtag defund police, but you know, why would you do that? And my sense is until we come up with an alternative solution that works, right? That is the solution that's on the table. And when you have law enforcement that allows the harassment, right, of people protesting on the streets of Portland, Oregon, right, when still too many people are going to sleep hungry, right, going to sleep without hope, right? We have to build a better society. So at the end of the day, right, here's what I think. I hope everyone in this audience gets really serious, right? And understand you may have wondered what you would have done in the midst of the 1960 civil rights movement. And the truth is you're gonna find out when you walk out of this podcast tonight, right? Exactly what you do after this is exactly what you would have done in 1968. So make it count, right? And don't just be a performer on the street, right? This is about building the society we say we want. And that only happens if we get into communities, and now I'm preaching again, right? But there is a difference, right? Let me give everybody a chance to breathe, too, right? Because this is a message to my friends, too. And we can have this conversation some other time. But we gotta get serious if we're talking about organizing and building community. That takes real investment. That's not driving 9 miles across town to put other people in chaos who don't even know what's happening, right? That's vanguardism. And vanguardism needs to be put to bed. What we need are real democracy buildings, right? And that's what we saw with Black Lives Matters on the streets of Portland and across this country. And that's what we're gonna see with women, right? Who have understood that this entire backlash in this country has been about the hatred of women. Racism is about misogyny. Homophobia is about misogyny. Economic inequality is about misogyny. And this is our moment to get it right. So let's back up Texas and let's take care of our own community. This isn't one city fight. This is a fight for the country. And it's the society we say we want in this world. Okay, I'm done. I said
It's about misogyny. I like that. I'm sorry, Teddy Wheeler is about misogyny.
Just one more time for Ted Wheeler, a little dumb.
You know, I'm gonna clean this screen.
We're gonna move on to our final segment, but just a round of applause for Mac and Eric for sharing. Watching live, so shout out. How you doing? Good to have you. We've got one more segment. Okay, so I don't know if you guys saw that Eric Clapton has a new song out. Very important song. A little weird if you watch the music video a little too carefully. It turns out Eric Clapton is an anti-vaxxer. He's an anti-masker. He doesn't want lockdowns. He's basically like he won't perform at shows where the vaccine cards are being checked. You know, I know how much everyone loves Clapton in this room, and how he never did anything weird, like Sheryl Crow, super weird, that like, you know, change your opinion about it. The point is we believe that most of your idols, especially music idols, are probably going to get red pilled in like the next 10 years. They're all going to become reactionary. Let's watch a little bit of the video, but this is My Future Fallen Idol.
You know he's old.
All right, creepy clown music,
real?
and let's see if I can bring this guy
You
up.
should watch the George.
End the stream.
You just took it right away. I'm it's like George.
You.
I'm not with your wife.
You.
I remember this song called Layla.
You.
And it worked.
It worked. Like, so easy.
Oh, here we
We don't
go.
want copyright
I was
infringement,
not very
so
good at
I'm live
this has
streaming.
got to stop. You can see
No,
it.
I'm
There's
just
a
saying,
record
like,
spinning around.
yeah.
Oh, this is like a
You heard it here first,
Adbusters,
folks.